that was downgraded. The big part where all of the people's deposits and loans are was also downgraded, but not as much. So all the Merrill partners said, you know what, can you just move it over there so we have a better rating, so it's cheaper to keep those derivatives going. And so we're more certain that Bank of America won't fail on them to us. And
okay.
So what
Okay, let me ask you this question, and we're going to go to calls. I mean, I know they planned all this as a way to bring down governments, take over, but they've done such a good job at wrecking things. They've been exposed. I don't see any way they're going to get away with this. And as you've pointed out, and other economists have pointed out, it's a black hole. It's impossible to ever pay back. They can't convince the public forever it's our debt when, again, over 90% of it globally is their fraudulent, made-up debt. And so they're living on a prayer. They're living on a hoax that people don't call their bluff. And I see the only way they're going to try to stay in power is stage terror attacks, new wars. That's why we're seeing the Senate pass a law that citizens can just be disappeared. The military can arrest you. All of this is happening. What's your view on that? And then I'm going to go to calls for military and police officers and others that have called in on that subject. This indefinite detention, the bedrock, hallmark, bellwether certification that you're living in a super tyranny.
Well, the whole notion of this police state and you know, is basically to keep people quiet. It is to keep them from, you know, looking into what's really going on. And if there are any sort of you know, clawbacks from a population standpoint to quiet it, to dampen it, because when you have this sort of financial terrorism going throughout the world, and it's the money that controls all of this, you know, whether it's a military operation that's new somewhere or whatever, you know, somewhere in that equation, you know, there's defense contractors making some money, but beyond that, honestly, there are banks betting on what will happen. And so sort of increasing, you know, the sort of overall risk in the world, which, yeah, you're right, it has nothing to do with individuals. Our debt here in the United States, $14 trillion of debt. The banks have $249 trillion of derivatives. So it obviously isn't us. But to subdue discontent, information gathering, the public disclosure of that information just helps to propagate all of this crime. Because if no one's around to call it out, or no one can call it out, or people being jailed to call it out, or journalists are even being jailed to call it out, then you have a situation where information becomes really hard to go by, and it allows those in control to stay in control because the dissent is just squelched.
Well, I just want listeners to know, and most people figured this out now, over the years, detractors, COINTELPRO have said I'm a fearmonger predicting all of this. History's pretty wild. History's pretty scary. And we're definitely going down a very nasty path. Unfortunately, it's all coming true, in some cases worse than I thought it would and quicker. And I just hope people realize, you know, a full spectrum of our guests and other even, you know, mainline researchers agree now we're in a whole lot of trouble. And this culture of denial has allowed this to happen, Nomi.
No, I agree. I am. Whenever I get emails, and I'm sure you get more from people saying, you know, thanks for sharing information, because we're not getting this from mainstream media. We're not getting these details because there's these pat stories, you know, like in Europe. Oh, the European countries are doing bad, so we're helping them out. No, that's not the case. We have banks that bet on them and have gotten bailed out. You know, so there's
the banks are getting our money in a bailout, which isn't a bailout. It's a robbery. Nomi, stay there. Call straight ahead. Okay, we're back. Nomi Prinz is our guest. 5 minutes to the next hour. Then Bob Chapman joins us. We'll continue with news and open phones. Some of the articles I have is from Japan to Ireland to the U.S. Politicians and others are calling for lithium to be added to the water to calm the public. Now, we know they've actually been doing this for a while, but now they're just admitting it. Boy, I tell you, there is no end to these people. This is out of the Irish Times. I want to plug something. Not only everybody can listen to the radio show on XM, AM, FM, all of those systems. But if you want to actually see the radio show and support us and see the nightly news show, subscribe at prisonplanet.tv. And one of the IT guys over prisonplanet.tv just came in here and said, hey, we haven't gotten rid of that 15-day free trial yet. So I thought we were getting rid of it at the end of November. And he goes, no, it's gone tonight. It'll be gone this afternoon. So if you want the 15-day free trial, it ends today. I thought it ended 2 days ago. And we also, of course, have the new special for the month of December, 44% off on a yearly membership, 5.3 months free when you buy 6.7 months. And your support does finance our news operation in the face of the globalists, prisonplanet.tv. I want to go to some phone calls for Nomi Prinz, but Nomi, I mean, what's coming next if they say the military can secretly arrest you and hold you for life and no one knows where you went? I mean, this is literally the disappearances they talk about in North Korea.
No, it's so sad. It's that suppression of content. We're supposed to be a democracy. You know, we're supposed to be able to express information and opinions and everything else as long as we're not hurting anyone. And obviously doing so isn't hurting anyone unless you're getting violent with it, which isn't the intent of what's going on now. The intent is really to just quell information, journalism, discontent. And it's amazing in a world in which there is so much that needs to be extracted, that needs to be made light, because things are more rapidly decaying now. You know, the derivative stuff it sounds all techie, but I mean, it's not. We're talking about, you know, capital that used to be just decimating and causing depressions in the 20s when it was easy to sort of understand it. Now it's more complex, but it's much more
fraudulent
powerful.
garbage that they've sold into the market that they make money on the front end with, and then they make us bail it out on the back end. It's incredible theft. Cole in... where are you calling from, Cole? You're in the military, you say. You're concerned about this. Where are you calling from?
That's Missouri.
Okay, Missouri. Give us your view on what's happening.
Okay, well, just give you a little bit of history myself. I'm former active duty, current National Guardsman. I was there on the ground July 12th, 2007 during the Apache check. I was in a different company, though. I just wanted to hit on a few things real quick. Yesterday I was scanning a story on Yahoo about Ron Paul, and you see all the comments, and it's just, you know, people that are bashing him, see it all just, you know, negative comments. They're all hidden. And then, you know, the story just disappears. So you see the psyop going on with that. The current state of the National Guard, you know, I'm getting out here in just a few months, but one of the guys there, he was all fired up about the Fast and the Furious thing. And we talked about it for a little while, and here came September 11th, and he posted something on Facebook and said, you know, everyone needs to shut up about this inside job thing. And I posted back. I was like, hey, you know, we're all fired up, you know, about them shipping 2,000 guns across the border to Mexico. You know, the government would never, you know, do anything like 9/11. He's like, well, you know, point taken, I guess. So, you know, you just got to point little things out to that to people.
Exactly. Governments get caught doing this stuff all the time. It doesn't mean there aren't terrorists somewhere, but the point is most of this stuff is provocateur or manufactured. Well, talking to your friends in the National Guard, are they concerned about this?
Quite a few of them are. A lot of them gotten out. A lot of them, you know, they signed long contracts, so they're just stuck with it. But a good number of them are. Then, you know, there's always the guys that are just oblivious to everything and are just there for whatever reason.
Well, no doubt we've moved 2 minutes closer to midnight. Thank you. 5 more minutes with Nomi Prinz. We'll get her take on this. Talk to Recon Marine and others straight ahead. And then Bob Chapman joins us, and I'm going to get into a bunch of other news we haven't covered, including the power plant shutdowns. NomiPrinz.com is her website, and we ran one of her articles at Infowars.com. The Fed's European rescue, another backdoor U.S. bank Goldman bailout. Our final segment with her. I really appreciate her joining us. We're also getting to your calls right now, dealing with this military takeover situation. I mean, I know I'm harping on this because we kept telling people this was coming, and now it's here, and TSA is setting up checkpoints on highways. I mean, how much more obvious does it have to get that this Homeland Security system is for the American people and not for terrorism, Nomi?
It's unfortunate, but it seems like every step, you know, like you've been talking about, like what's going on now. It's obvious that it's not going to go backwards. I mean, that there's a consolidated effort to squelch, you know, individualism here, which is really not what this country was, you know, founded for. And it's really, really dangerous because once you do that, you know, as you've spoken about, as others know, it's hard to turn back.
It is hard to turn back, and that's what tyranny does. It tends to slide until it collapses itself because the society of criminals will just rob and rape and loot everything until everything collapses. And I mean, you worked around these people. Max Kaiser has, many others have. Max and others have said they're like suicide bankers, like the banker that stayed at his desk, even though he knew that he was probably going to die on 9/11 to make an extra $10 million. And, I mean, certainly they're not going to stop themselves, are they?
No, and they've only seen that what they do is more and more coddled by the government. We had unprecedented bailouts and subsidies, starting in 2008. We have another slew going on now with respect to U.S. bank exposure to Europe. It's only ramping up, and in the face of that, the top U.S. bankers are basically just laughing, because it's like, look, we're increasing our risk, even though we screwed up the world back then. We're going to continue to do it. You're going to continue to back us. The Federal Reserve is so supportive of this that they, in broad daylight, say on their website, which I pointed out in this piece, which no one else seemed to point out, that this recent European intervention by them was a way to support the U.S. banks. This isn't even me saying this. This is like the Fed's own words. And yet we're so conditioned to just follow, the mainstream headlines, which is just, we're bailing out to help Europe.
Exactly. But then even
question this. It's out there.
Sure. But then even the so-called U.S. banks, as you pointed out earlier, are moving to China, so they're not U.S. banks.
Well, finance is global. That's $707 trillion worth of derivatives is global. And the U.S. banks, even if they're domiciled here, they're headquartered here, they have the ability to do whatever they want, wherever they want. The part that's not global is how the Fed and Treasury Department will basically increase our debt as a nation in order to support their bad bets when they go wrong, and then keep them from going wrong for next time. And so that's the part that's more domestic. The international part is global finance. It's fast, it's powerful, it's controlled by a few banks and a few people that are strategically positioned within various governments or government agencies. I mean, even the New York Federal Reserve was run by Tim Geithner. It's got a Class A directorship given to Jamie Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, which he had during the subprime crisis, and it was reconfirmed for him to be there now. So you have the biggest global bank in charge of basically, having the relationship to be able to get money to bail out, subsidize, and increase their exposure and their power globally. So yeah, it's a true mess. It's just bigger now than it's ever been, because we have had a derivatives market that's grown even more quickly than it has in the past. Wow,
Nomi Prinz, thank you so much. Inside Whistleblower joining us here today, and you can find out more about her new book at nomiprinz.com. I look forward to speaking to you in the future, if there is a future. Thank you, Nomi.
Thank you, Alex.
We'll be right back with Bob Chapman, and I promise we're going to your calls early. I'm going to get to Recon, Martin, Ironhead, Philip, Frank. I'm going to get to all of you. Bob loves calls. We'll take your calls first, then get into everything with Bob Chapman on the economy. Well, Bob Chapman is quite a character. He's a military veteran, worked in intelligence, then he was a private silver and gold broker, the largest private silver gold broker at one time in the United States. He's lived all over the world, and he then helped put out the Gary Allen report exposing the globalist, and none dare call it conspiracy, 40-plus years ago. And he now lives at an undisclosed location outside the United States, because the long arm of the New World Order has been seeking after him. And he joins us in this hour to take calls from police, military, and others to get their view on the fact that the media is going, hey, the Army's going to be on the streets of America. You've already seen us illegally doing it. Well, now it's legal. Of course, they can't pass a law saying black people are slaves again. My point is just
to what's really going on. And if there are any sort of clawbacks from a population standpoint to quiet it, to dampen it, because when you have this sort of financial terrorism going throughout the world, and it's the money that controls all of this, whether it's a military operation that's new somewhere or whatever, somewhere in that equation, there's defense contractors making.
I mean, I know they planned all this as a way to bring down governments, take over, but they've done such a good job at wrecking things. They've been exposed. I don't see any way they're going to get away with this. And as you've pointed out, and other economists have pointed out, it's a black hole. It's impossible to ever pay back. They can't convince the public forever it's our debt when, again, over 90% of it globally is their fraudulent, made-up debt. And so they're living on a prayer. They're living on a hoax that people don't call their bluff. And I see the only way they're going to try to stay in power is stage terror attacks, new wars. That's why we're seeing the Senate pass a law that citizens can just be disappeared. The military can arrest you. All of this is happening. What's your view on that? And then I'm going to go to calls for military and police officers and others that have called in on that subject. This indefinite detention, the bedrock, hallmark, bellwether certification that you're living in a super tyranny.
Well, the whole notion of this police state and is basically to keep people quiet. It is to keep them from, looking in. That was downgraded. The big part where all of the people's deposits and loans are was also downgraded, but not as much. So all the Merrill partners said, you know what, can you just move it over there so we have a better rating, so it's cheaper to keep those derivatives going. And so we're more certain that Bank of America won't fail on them to us. And
okay.
So what the...
Okay, let me ask you this question, and we're going to go to calls.